In the bustling streets of Johannesburg, South Africa, nestled in a small rundown apartment, lived two innocent twin girls, Zenzi and Zola, and their mother, Sibling. Known for her beauty and her charm, Sibongil's life was tainted by her battles with alcoholism. As the weight of unpaid debts grew heavier, the shadows of her past life threatened their very existence. In the apartment's sparse interior, Sibongile frantically packing belongings. "We have to leave now," Sibongile mutters, grabbing the twins by their hands. Desperation drove Sibongile to make the hardest decision of her life: escape to America. The hope for a new beginning shimmered faintly in the horizon as they boarded a flight that was to alter the course of their lives forever. Arriving in a land of opportunity, the twins stood before their new home, a grand house belonging to their wealthy Aunt Lindy. While their mother continued to chase her own demons, Aunt Lindy embraced the girls with open arms, determined to give them a life their mother never could. Aunt Lindy opened the door with a warm smile. "Welcome home, my darlings." The girls looked up in awe at the grand house. Life under Aunt Lindy's care offered opportunities the twins had never imagined. Zenzi, the focused and diligent twin, thrived academically, immersing herself in studies. Zola, on the other hand, found herself drawn to a more perilous path, mirroring her mother's destructive habits. Zenzi, the good twin, studied diligently in her tidy bedroom. Zola's dimly lit room was often surrounded by empty bottles and gambling paraphernalia. Their rooms represented the path each girl had taken. As Zenzi flourished, Zola spiraled out of control. As her addiction to drugs and alcohol worsened, she found herself getting further indebted to drug dealers who were initially happy to front her drugs as she charmed them with her beauty. But eventually, her looks were not enough to cover her mounting debt. One day, her dealer had enough and threatened her. "Zola, you have 1 week to get my money, or I'm going to teach you what happens to little girls who play with me. Get my money," he said as he grabbed her by her collar and pushed her away from him. As darkness crept into Zola's soul, desperation morphed into a sinister resolve. She believed that escaping her tormented existence could only be achieved by living Zenzi's life. For weeks, she studied her sister's habits, movements, and routines, all the while cloaked in the shadows of her guilt and envy. Every step Zenzi took, every decision she made was now under Zola's scrutiny. The dichotomy between their lives was stark, one filled with purpose and light, the other engulfed by darkness and despair. Envy festered within Zola as she observed her sister's life from the fringes. The yearning for normalcy, for acceptance, twisted into a plan, one that required meticulous execution. "I'm Zenzi, and today's going to be a great day," Zola rehearses, her voice wavering with both resolve and desperation. The depth of Zola's obsession became evident as she meticulously transformed herself into a mirror image of Zenzi. The weight of her plan bore down heavily on her, yet her determination eclipsed any reservations. Zola's longing turned into a sinister determination. She saw this celebration as a reminder of the stark contrast between their lives, one celebrated, the other forgotten. That night, Zola resolved to set her plan into motion. With each passing day, Zola's plan grew darker, the lines between right and wrong blurring as her desperation mounted. The ultimate betrayal took shape in the dead of night, fueled by a twisted sense of entitlement and despair. As Zola's plot reached its crescendo, the fragile balance of their lives teetered on the edge of destruction. The night of reckoning loomed near, casting a long shadow over their intertwined fates. The night was cloaked in a heavy silence, the air thick with tension. Inside the grand house, shadows stretched ominously across the walls, mirroring the dark intentions brewing within. Zola's plan was on the brink of execution, her desperation having clouded any sense of morality. The time had come to confront Zenzi and seize the life she believed should have been hers. In her mind, Zola justified her actions. If she could just eliminate Zenzi, she could assume her identity, escape her debts, and live the life of security and acceptance she so desperately craved. Inside Zenzi's room, the peaceful ambience starkly contrasts with the turmoil outside. Zenzi is asleep, oblivious to the looming danger. Zola's plan was simple yet chilling. She intended to incapacitate Zenzi, locking her in the basement, hidden away where no one would find her. She knew her aunt never entered the basement, as it was sadly where her husband died many years ago, and that though her aunt was social, she never had people over. Once Zenzi was locked away, she would then assume Zenzi's identity, hoping the world would never notice the switch. If they wanted to know where Zola was, she would just tell them that Zola was unhappy and ran away. Zola quietly enters the room, her eyes scanning for anything that might alert Zenzi. She approaches the bed, the tension palpable. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Zenzi." "This is the only way," Zola murmurs, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and resolve. Zola stood over Zenzi, weapon in hand, ready to execute her plan. Zenzi stirs in her sleep, sensing the presence. Her eyes flutter open, and she gasps as she recognizes Zola standing over her. Zenzi's survival instincts kicked in immediately. The sudden confrontation jolted her awake, her mind racing to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before her. Zenzi leaps out of bed, backing away from Zola. The room is tense, the sisters' faces reflecting fear, anger, and confusion. "Zola, what are you doing? This isn't you!" Zenzi cries, trying to reason with her sister. Zola, tears streaming down her face, swings the weapon erratically, her desperation evident. "You don't understand, Zenzi. I need this. I need your life. I can't go on like this," Zola screams, her voice cracking. The room erupted into chaos as the sisters grappled, their lives hanging in the balance. The struggle was intense, their bond tested to its breaking point. Zenzi and Zola wrestle for control. Zenzi manages to disarm Zola, pinning her to the ground. "You can't take my life, Zola. We can find another way. We can get you help," Zenzi pleads, her voice steady despite the fear. Zola breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably. The weight of her actions crashed down on her. As Zola's tears fell, so did the walls she had built around her guilt and pain. The reality of what she had almost done to her sister hit her like a tidal wave. Zenzi, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow, sits beside her, putting a gentle hand on Zola's shoulder. "Zola, it's not too late. We can fix this. You don't have to do this alone," Zenzi says softly, her voice full of compassion. In that moment of vulnerability, the sisters found a flicker of their childhood bond, a bond that Zola had thought was long shattered. The realization that she was not alone in her struggle, that her sister was willing to help her through this, became a beacon of hope. Zenzi helped Zola up, and the two sisters stood together in the dimly lit room, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled it moments before. The night of confrontation gave way to dawn, casting a new light on the sisters' lives. The household, once filled with tension and unspoken words, was now stirring with the echoes of truth and reconciliation. The resolution to this tumultuous chapter was about to unfold, with law enforcement stepping in to untangle the web of deception. The house is bathed in the early morning light. The sound of sirens grows louder as police cars pull up outside, their lights flashing against the backdrop of the quiet neighborhood. The arrival of the police marked a pivotal moment. Zola's actions had reached a point where the law had to intervene, ensuring that justice and order were restored. The police officers stepped out of their cars and walked up the grand steps to the house. Inside the house, Zenzi and Zola sat together in the living room. Zenzi held Zola's hand, offering silent support as they waited for the inevitable. Zenzi's unwavering support gave Zola the strength to face the consequences of her actions. The bond of sisterhood, though tested, was not broken. The doorbell rang and Aunt Lindy answered, her face pale but composed. She led the officers to the living room. "Officers, thank you for coming. We need your help," Aunt Lindy says, her voice steady but tinged with worry. The officers approached the sisters. Zola stood up, her hands trembling, but her resolve clear. "I'm ready to face what I've done," Zola says, her voice breaking but filled with a newfound sense of responsibility. Zola's admission was the first step towards redemption. Accepting her mistakes, she was willing to face the consequences, a stark contrast to the desperation that had driven her actions. The officers gently handcuffed Zola, leading her out of the house. Zenzi followed closely, her eyes filled with tears but also with pride for her sister's courage. "I'll be here for you, Zola. We'll get through this together," Zenzi vows, her voice a mix of sadness and hope. Zola was led to the police car, the weight of her actions reflected in her somber expression. Zenzi watched, her hand over her heart, signaling a promise to stand by her sister's side. As Zola was taken away, the house felt a mixture of sorrow and hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but the steps towards healing had begun. The sisters' bond, once threatened by darkness, now held the promise of light and redemption. Zenzi stood at the doorway, watching the police car drive away, the morning sun casting a hopeful glow on her face. With the dawn breaking over the horizon, a sense of calm began to envelop the house. Despite the turmoil of the past, a new chapter was about to begin. Zenzi, standing tall amidst the aftermath, was ready to embrace the future with resilience and hope. The path of healing, though arduous, was now within sight. The sun rises, casting a warm glow over the grand house. Zenzi stood on the porch, her face illuminated by the morning light. The ordeal had left scars, both seen and unseen, but it also brought clarity and strength. Zenzi knew that moving forward wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to rebuild not just her life, but also the fragile bond with her sister. As Zenzi stood on the porch, looking out at the sunrise, she felt it symbolized a new beginning. Zenzi walked into her room and packed a small bag. She placed a photograph of her and Zola as children into the bag, a symbol of her commitment to their relationship. With each item packed, Zenzi's resolve strengthened. She was ready to visit Zola, ready to offer her the support she needed to turn her life around. Zenzi walked into the kitchen with Aunt Lindy and shared a quiet breakfast with her. The tension from the previous night had lifted slightly, replaced by a tentative hope. "I'm going to see Zola today. She needs to know she's not alone," Zenzi says, her voice filled with determination. Aunt Lindy nods, placing a reassuring hand on Zenzi's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing. Family is everything," Aunt Lindy replies, her eyes glistening with pride. Support from Aunt Lindy provided Zenzi with the strength she needed. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was paved with love and hope. Zenzi drove to the rehabilitation center where Zola had been admitted. The journey was interspersed with flashbacks of their childhood, highlighting moments of joy and unity. "We can't change the past, but we can shape our future," Zenzi thinks, her face set with determination. Zenzi arrived at the center. She took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, her resolve unwavering. Zenzi walked towards the entrance, the rehabilitation center sign in the background, symbolizing a step towards healing. Inside the center, Zenzi was led to a visiting room. Zola sat there, looking fragile but hopeful. The sisters locked eyes, and for a moment the weight of their journey was shared in silence. The first steps of reconciliation are often the hardest, but they also hold the greatest promise. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the rehabilitation center, the sisters found a sliver of hope. Zenzi sat down opposite Zola and reached out to hold her sister's hand. She looked at their hands clasped together and saw it as a symbol of their connection and commitment to moving forward together. "We'll get through this, Zola. One step at a time," Zenzi says softly, her voice filled with unwavering support. The sisters shared a tentative smile, the beginning of a long road to healing, and, as they sat there hand in hand, the promise of a new beginning took root. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, together. Zenzi and Zola sat together, the light of the new day streaming through the window.